Hello, everybody. Welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. And I am your host, BMR. Tonight, or I should say this afternoon, early afternoon, we've got a great guest, Steve Stockton, Missing Persons, Mysteries, and 13 Past Midnight, will be joining us shortly. And when I say us, my co-host today is the beautiful Krista Tweedy, Blondes and Booze. That's our YouTube channel. Go subscribe, Blondes and Booze. We'll talk more about that later. If this is your first time here, please subscribe, hit the thumbs up, share this out, leave a comment, and of course, always put on the alert bell. You can find us on YouTube at Texas Front Porch and Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. We're also on Odyssey and iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and wherever podcasts are found. Also, we're on KPNL Radio. Thanks to the lovely Ann Selene for that out in Oregon. You can also find us on Facebook at Texas Front Porch. You can email us at paircryptidencounters@gmail or beyondbmr@gmail. Don't forget to subscribe to Texas Front Porch. Subscribe to Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. And hey, if you haven't already, Missing Persons, Mysteries with Steve Stockton, 13 Past Midnight with Steve Stockton. Of course, my host, Piss, tonight, Blondes and Booze. If you like our content and want to support us, today the Super Chat is always open. And you know what? Long after the show, so is the Super Thanks. You might not catch the show, so if you're watching later and you want to drop a couple bones, the Super Thanks is always available for you. You can check out our channels, their About pages, our description pages. We have a lot more content to offer outside of live shows. Check us out. We'll keep you updated on future events. With that being said, I'm going to bring up my co-host. I lost Steve somehow. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
What's going on? How's it going?
It's a good day.
Yeah, it's funny. I just looked down, and Steve fell off.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And I'm sure that I'm pretty sure he probably realizes that. And I'm going to send him a quick text here. And
All right.
I'm sure he knows. But so how's it going, Krista?
It's going. It's Thursday, which means it's one day closer to the weekend.
It is one day closer to the weekend. And yeah, I'm going to take this opportunity to personally congratulate you and the Blondes and Booze for joining our team.
Thank you.
And this is the first time that you've co-hosted with me. Jessica Jones usually sits in, and she things going on, and I'm very honored and pleased to have you join me here today with Steve Stockton, who will be joining us momentarily.
Yeah, I'm honored you asked. And then you have such a great guest. I've been watching his stuff too, so this will be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun show.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Steve. I see he's coming back up, so that's cool. 3 straight shows we've had some sort of technical difficulty to start, but as always, we put on a good show anyways, and we usually muddle through it.
Right.
And I'm just doing something on my phone really quick. Sorry, audience. I gotta. There's always something going on.
Yep.
And here we go. All right, I'm gonna bring Steve up. He looks like he's good to go.
Yeah.
Hey, fellas, how's it doing? BMR and Krista, good to see you.
Hey,
I think I was on my end that time. I saw an Xfinity truck out in the street earlier, and every time I see those guys out there, something happens to my internet. I think it winked out. I believe, honestly, I think they tear stuff up just to get to fix it. So
I think they do.
Back
they like
now.
We were talking earlier about working overtime. That's exactly what they're doing, aren't they?
Yep.
It's funny, Steve. You and I were talking the other day, and regarding some business, and I was like, oh my gosh, how come? Because right here where I live, we have telephone lines still. We don't have anything underground. We don't have any fancy cable. So they've been in my neighborhood the last month redoing everything. So every day I probably lose 4 hours of actual internet service.
Wow.
And it's really, I work from home.
It's annoying. Mine tends to go down in the middle of the night, but that's when I work. I'm an insomniac, and I'm usually up all night. I don't go to bed till the sun comes up, and then I only sleep a couple hours. But yeah, it'll go out just for no reason in the middle of the night sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate when that happens, but we all experience it. It's like nothing new, right? In this day of
Yeah.
technology, I can't wait for the optic fibers to move in.
Yep.
That's what I have.
You do? Well, then so how is that for you, Krista? Is it pretty good?
Knock on wood, it's been okay. So I do have
Okay.
issues sometimes if it storms real bad outside or something, but
Yeah.
too windy or something. But
Don't have fiber optic here in the desert where I'm at, but I've got the fastest you can get out here. It's like the 1.2 gigabit, and it flies, but then sometimes it just goes dead. So who knows?
Well, here what I got a brand new system for the studio area, and I've got the fastest speed you can get, and I got a system that's pretty much dedicated for podcasting and doing videos, which is pretty good. But you know what? It doesn't matter how good your equipment is when that cable goes out. So,
Yep.
so Steve, man, again, thank you. Welcome to the show. I think you were on last year with me and Tex, which was a great show.
Yeah, I was on a while back too, a few weeks ago, I think. Like I said, I do so many shows, I lose count. But I know I've been on with you at least once before.
Well, I know it was on you over the 13 past midnight where you did the 31 days or 30 days of Halloween.
31 nights of Halloween.
31 nights, yeah. And everybody, if you haven't checked it out, go to subscribe to 13 past midnight with Steve Stockton, outside of Missing Persons Mysteries. 2 great channels, and I'm glad that. To be a part of that. And so moving forward, missing persons, right, Steve? First of all, I know it's a fabulous channel. You're a great writer, and everybody just raves over your narrations, including myself, because I can kick back, and I hate to say this, Steve, because your videos are awesome, but sometimes it puts me to sleep. Not because they're boring, not because they're boring. Okay,
I get that a lot. And that doesn't bother me. I mean, you can always go back and rewatch it. I've put myself to sleep at my desk editing before, but also have people that have chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, PTSD, chronic pain. I already say that one. That have these issues and ailments, and they say my voice relaxes them and helps them rest or go to sleep. So right on. If it helps somebody, then I'm doing what I need to be doing. And I like being an advocate for the people that don't have a voice, the people that are missing. And that's part of the whole mission here. If we can bring one person home or give one family closure, then we've done what we set out to do.
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're providing a service, and you're entertaining people and providing that voice. And I was going to ask you, you kind of already answered the question, though. I was going to say, when did you start on this endeavor with the missing people?
Well, I'd written some stuff about disappearances in the Great Smoky Mountains where I grew up, and I'd narrated that over on 13 past midnight when I first started over there. And then Bill Melder, the creator of Missing Persons and Mysteries, saw that, and he left a comment on, I think it's my Dennis Martin video, and said, "Hey, how would you like to come over here and narrate?" And I would get that occasion. I'd go look, and it'd be like somebody with 10 subscribers or something, And I remember I went over and looked, and he had like 10,000. And I was like, wow, that's a lot. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. He brought me on as a full partner, and it took off. We just went from 10,000 to 30,000 to 60,000, and then 100,000 about a year ago, and then just this week we passed 240,000. So
Wow.
whatever we're doing, people like it.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, I been watching your shows as well, and I have a 10-year-old daughter, and the other night I was watching one, and she sat down there and watched it with me. So it's not just us adults too. My 10-year-old was really into it, and she asked a lot of questions.
It is, the missing is the main focus, but the mystery side of the name, we do a little bit of everything over there. A little bit of the paranormal, a little bit of the woo, listener stories. That's one of our most popular features, and that's where the viewers send in things they've experienced. So
yeah.
And you talk about the mystery, Stephen, I'd like to get a little bit into some of your favorite stories, but before we even get there, you've been doing this for a while. Again, thousands of videos and stories that you've shared. when you sit down and take a look back at everything, what is it? I know it's not just one thing going on that these people come up missing, right? It could be paranormal, it could be serial killers, it could be hell, who knows, cryptids. I mean, when you look at it, what's your assessment?
Yeah, well, it's like you said, it could be any one of those things or all those things. There are cases that are pretty cut and dried. It's a human predator, like you said, a serial killer or something gone wrong that way. Then there's people that simply get lost. There's people that wander off into the woods, usually unprepared, ill-equipped, and don't know what they're up against, and they perish due to the elements. But then there are ones that have a supernatural element to them as well. Now, when you get off into that side of it, is it aliens? Is it Bigfoot? Is it some sort of cryptid, dogman? Yes, maybe. Who knows? It's, there's definitely a supernatural element to some of these cases.
Absolutely.
Because and watching a lot of your content, I do draw a lot of parallels with a lot of these things, and one of the things that I found is, especially on expeditions, you've probably heard this before, where it always seems like if there's a group of 5-6 people, whatever the number is, do you find it strange or coincidence that it always seems like during these expeditions, it's always the person that's last in line, especially if you're walking in a single file, that all of a sudden they just turn up missing?
Yeah, either the last one in line or sometimes the first one if they get too far ahead. So if you go in a group and you don't want to go missing, stay with the group. Mm-hmm. Maybe do like they do with little kids, where they tie all your wrists together and everybody say don't lose the smaller ones. But yeah, it's and I don't really believe in coincidence because I think things happen for a reason, or things are either planned or there's something else going on there. But there's a lot of coincidences, if you want to call it that happen. People that wear red tend to go missing more often than people that are wearing other colors. You'd think that'd be just the opposite. You're out and you got a red shirt on, you think it'd be easy to see, easy to spot. But I could list a half dozen people that were wearing red when they went missing. People tend to go missing near berry fields or berry patches. People tend to go missing in boulder fields or near boulder fields. And then sometimes when people are found, they'll be in a boulder field. And the ones that are deceased, they often look like they've been dropped from a great height when there is no height to have been dropped from. So that's kind of odd. Now, again, it gets off into legends and lore here, but the Algonquin Indians of New England, they have a story of a creature that can disguise itself as a boulder. You're walking along just minding your own business. The boulder opens up, swallows you, closes back, does whatever it does to you, and then spits you back out. Well, if you had been taken in by this boulder creature and crushed and then spit out, you might look like you'd fallen from a great height. So who knows? There's some out there that defy any rational explanation. Now, a lot of times Occam's razor comes into play, or whatever the simplest explanation is usually the most accurate, but that doesn't apply in all these cases by far.
Yeah, it's funny you should say about this, the missing the stone or the boulder, and I'm going to leave it at that. I think I'm going with that one. That was that's an awesome event. And you do mention, there's a lot of lore, a lot of legends about. You mentioned a lot of these people wearing red. Do you think? What is it about the color red, Steve? Red is, you see red. There are red stop signs. There's, red traffic lights, and it seems like red cars get stolen, especially a shiny brand new Corvette. What is it? It can't be a coincidence either. Red is, as much as a pretty color it is, especially now with Christmas coming up. That's kind of, and red is associated with the devil. I'm beginning to think that red might not be the color of choice here.
Yeah, and here I am wearing red. I hope I don't go missing after that.
Well, you were missing for about 5 minutes ago, but yeah.
But yeah, it's a warning color. It's a trigger color. I mean, like you said, stop signs,
Mhm.
anything with a warning label's got a big red circle or something on it, But same like the old adage. I don't know how true it is that if you wave something red in front of a bull, it'll infuriate the bull and they'll chase you. Well,
Mhm.
if and again, I'm going way out there. I'm going to go there, but if you believe in the Fae theory that they're beings, creatures in the woods that are older than man, and there's Indian legends about little people and stuff out there. Allegedly, if you look into some of the lore of that back in the Celtic countries where the Fae were almost a religion to those people, red is something that angers the Fae folk. So that might be why if that's who's taking people, that's why they take people wearing red.
Mhm.
And that's a stretch, but there you go. And it's funny because people that ardently believe in Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, you mention the Fae and they'll kind of giggle at you, but hey, if I believe in everything, it's just the experiences that I've had, who am I to judge and say, no, you didn't see that, or you're making it up or whatever. So I've seen Bigfoot. I've encountered Bigfoot where I didn't see Bigfoot. I've heard Bigfoot, had rocks thrown at me in the woods. I've seen unexplained lights in the sky. So who knows? Is it the Fae? Is it all these things put together? But the Fae theory does tie it up into a nice, neat package and put a little bow on the top. I was reading some accounts of encounters with the Fae from things like the 1700s, 1800s, and they talked about little men in a strange flying buggy from the sky that came down. Well, that's a UFO encounter. Or they encountered, hairy elementals or giants in the woods. And that was a great show on the Giants the other night with Duke. I loved that. But again, it all kind of falls within the framework of the Fae. If you, with a little bit of wiggling, beat it to fit, paint it to match, you can fit just about every kind of cryptid or UFO experience in the Fae framework.
Mhm.
And Krista, you can say anything. You can bump. Listen, if you let me talk, I will talk all day, Krista. But so you can feel free to jump in here. Krista's new. Krista's not new. It's the first time she's co-hosting with me, and you feel free to jump right in with anything you have. But I did want to ask Steve this. We talk about all of these: the elementals, the Fae, supernatural, paranormal, Bigfoot, murderers. Do you think it all comes really, to me, Steve? It's all connected. It all comes full circle at one spot. You cannot just blame it on one particular thing like others do.
Yep.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
wholeheartedly agree with you on that. As he was saying, you bring up the Fae and people frown upon that, but you know what? If you're open to these other things, why can't you be open to things like the Fae? And for sure.
And it's that way in a lot of other countries too. In some of the Scandinavian countries, they'll build a highway around an outcropping of boulders because they don't want to anger the trolls or the Fae or whatever they think lives in those boulder areas. So, and again, the Celtic countries, there's not as strong a belief in the Fae as there once was, but Ireland and places like that, there's just volumes of stories about the little people.
And here's the thing too, that there isn't any written rules on this, so anything is possible.
Yeah, I was with Soraya Ascath on his show, Where'd the Road Go, one time, and he said the paranormal is like you're trying to put a puzzle together, but you don't have the box to look at the picture to see what the puzzle even looks like. And then you find out some joker has mixed in like 5 or 6 puzzles into the same box. So you're working on a bunch of different puzzles. And that's a good analogy, I think, of the paranormal. I've researched this stuff and looked into it for decades. And I've found that there are no answers, but only more questions. I've got more questions than I started with. So now I'm not looking for answers anymore. I'm looking for the next set of questions.
Right. Well, you do good work for sure. I mean,
thank you.
Just to bring, like you
tip
said,
my hat to you.
Like closure, to a lot of these families. It's just getting awareness out there.
Yeah. And Krista, you make a great point about closure. And Steve, you brought up something too, which I totally agree with and respect, because I, much like yourself, if someone tells me a story, who am I to question what they saw or did not see, right? Now, they might not have seen a Bigfoot. It could have been something else. It could have been something supernatural. That's the question for debate. But when you're in the knower and experience, you're much like myself, having seen one and seen the transformation and the weird stuff that happened on that event. Who am I to judge people? I welcome all stories. Another show that I do is I will present encounter stories on a video format. I'll read them, and if I even think they're far fetched, who am I to say that they're not? Because you're good enough to send me your story. I'm going to report it as such.
Yep.
And I think we do a disservice by just.
Yeah, and I don't look at it as my job to vet the stories. I present them. It's up to you to decide what you believe in and what you don't, form your own opinion. In all the listener stories that we've had submitted to us, there was only one that I think somebody was trying to troll me, and a guy was talking about how he came across a giant elk in the woods, and it picked him up with his antlers and flipped it up on its back, and he rode it off into the woods. Now that one, I have my doubts. I'm like, I'm not going to read that one. But other than that, shadow people, ghosts, the hat man, the flannel man, all these, who knows? Like I said, I don't discount anything. I've been around long enough and I've seen enough that I know there's stuff that has no rational or scientific explanation, no matter how you turn it over and look at it.
Yeah.
Steve, I would only believe that story if the guy had said that it was one of Santa's reindeer. Listen or somebody.
Yeah. It's, like you said, anything's possible, and even, pictures and stories. That's the way I look at it. Who am I to judge? I wasn't there, and I know I have witnessed things that sound pretty far-fetched myself, but I know they're percent true.
But for somebody to tell me that, no, you didn't see that, it'd be like having somebody put their hand on a stove burner and say, no, that's not hot. I know what I experienced. I know what I saw. I know what I felt. I knew what led up to it, what happened afterwards. And, again, I've had things that have fooled me. I've seen things that I thought were something else until on closer examination. Okay, that is the water heater in the basement, or that was, a garbage bag stuck in a tree or whatever. Right. Everything is not paranormal, but there's a lot of stuff that is. It's in my experience.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
And in fact, in my first book, Strange Things in the Woods, I talk about that, how, a lot of the strange is a relative term. I've got some stories in there that are funny, some stories in there that are poignant, some stories in there that where they thought it was something and then they found out it was something else. But then there are some stories that just defy any explanation, and that's the beauty of it. It all comes together, and it's I love stories. I'm a raconteur. I'm a storyteller. I relate the stories as they told to me. I'm not an investigator or even really a researcher other than for my own writing, and I like it that way. Now, I was involved with some ghost hunting, a group back in the early 80s before such a thing existed in popular culture, but again, we didn't have anything definitive. Yeah, we saw and experienced some weird stuff, caught some stuff on tape, but what was it? Who knows?
Right, exactly. And back then in the 80s, ghost hunting wasn't what it is now. I think today it's really, a popular thing. Everybody wants to do it. But back in the 80s, there was something that was almost taboo, to tell someone that you did that, or for sure.
Yep.
For sure.
So when you come across some of these stories, Stephen, you're writing them or coming up or doing, again, you don't do the research, you look into them, of course. Have you ever come across a story where it's presented and the information provided you kind of maybe disagree with? You think, well, I don't think that's possible, and you come up with an alternative opinion? Does that come across, or you just flat out?
Occasionally, there's certain people out there, I won't name any names, but sometimes, especially with these missing person cases, they will present them in such a way to drive a narrative that they have, and they will omit facts. And I don't like to do that. I present the facts as I've found them, or that my writers have found them. So there's some things that I've heard, like an alternate version of it, and like, well, why didn't you mention this, that, or the other? Because it's a matter of public record. Again, I don't have to answer for anybody except myself, but I don't do that. I don't add anything to, or I don't leave stuff out
Right.
to make it drive a certain narrative or fit some spooky situation or something that some people do.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, and I can go ahead and say what maybe was on your mind, but I've talked to several people with the BFRO, and I will say it, and I gladly say it because it really ticks me off because a lot of the reports they send in are tainted. And the reason being, Steve, is we do this to help other people. And if somebody, and typically if it's a paranormal account or something, or maybe there was orbs in the area and Bigfoot appeared, right? And they'll send their encounter in. And again, I've spoken with people on this show about it that have told me this, and they taint or they what do? They wash the records. They will post your information, but they will omit other things. And to me, that really gets me mad because what I do today is provide a service for people to come on and tell their story, unedited, unabridged, right? And certain faculties out there that do this does us a disservice, and it does a disservice for researchers that are trying to come up with quote unquote facts.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's why we make every effort to put the most accurate information out that we can. The news reports, police reports, stuff that's come through like from a FOIA request, sometimes from the families, a Facebook page, organizations like the Charlie Project or NamUs, people that deal with this all the time. But then there's going to be some inaccuracies any which way you go. I've had family members get in touch with me and say, I know this is what it says and all that, but this happened or that happened, or you hadn't heard about this part. So we will make a correction. We'll make an update. In fact, there's a guy that went missing under some strange circumstances named Aaron Hodges. He was out with a hunting group. The mule supposedly threw his supplies off into the snow, and he couldn't find them, but he had some equipment cached in another place. So he split off from the group, went to find this cache of stuff that he had put there previously, and went missing. And then they didn't find him. I think it was like a year or two afterwards. I'm just paraphrasing here. I'd have to go back and look at my notes to know the exact circumstances. But he was eventually found deceased, and we reported, that. But then I had somebody contact me that her and her father were actually the ones that found his remains. And there's some additional details that never made it into the mainstream news, that never made it into any of the books or even our video. So she's going to come on with me sometime after the holidays and tell her side of what went on and how they found this person. And it makes it even stranger. It adds another level in there that most people don't know about. So that's the stuff I love, where you get something that it makes it make a little bit more sense, but it's still strange.
Yeah. How long does it take you to research a case?
It just depends, on the case and how many are involved and how long they've been missing and a lot of things. I've got some really good writers, and they do good research. And again, it depends on the individual case.
Yeah. Yeah.
We hear about a lot of these missing persons that are never found, right? Ever. They vanished. They're gone. No clues, nothing. What about those people, Steve, that they disappear for years, months, decades, perhaps? Then all of a sudden, they appear. They're back in society like nothing happened.
Yeah, now those are some of my favorite ones. First of all, anytime somebody does come back, that's a happy ending. And because those missing cases, particularly the children, they really get to me after a while. I mean, I've had to step away and compose myself when recording before, go watch fail videos or funny cats or something to kind of, because it gets in your head. Nietzsche wrote, when you appear, get it right in a minute, when you peer into the abyss also peers into you. That darkness can kind of get in there and mess with you. But that's some of my favorite stories, especially the ones where they weren't gone for years, because a lot of times I think those were somebody that maybe started over. Now, there are some under strange circumstances where people have been gone for a long time, then just showed back up, didn't know where they'd been or what had gone on. But the ones that fascinate me are the people that went missing, maybe for just a few hours, But when they came back, they thought they'd been gone for days or weeks. And then there's the obverse of that where somebody had been missing for weeks. But when they were found, they only thought they'd been gone a couple of weeks. And in fact, that's leading me up to another story I've got coming on. A friend of mine in Indiana, I'll call her Tiger Lily because I don't know what name she wants to be called by, but she's got a real interesting story from her childhood where her and one of her mom's friends went for a walk in the woods, and they walked and walked and walked and came to a place, and it was like evening when they left, came to a place where the sun was shining like noon. Again, there was berry bushes there, berry fields and stuff. There was an old cabin down to the side of a gravel road. She's had all these strange experiences, and then as an adult went back and looked on maps and actually went to the place that wherever they were, it didn't exist. It's not on any map. She's been through those woods dozens of times since then. It's just a short walk through a short section of woods there, and she just comes out the other side. But where was she when she was a child that she saw all this stuff? And
Right.
those are the ones that really fascinate me. People be hiking along on a trail, and suddenly the trail's not there. They turn around, the trail's not behind them. They have no idea where they're at or how to get back to where they were. That's the really fascinating ones to me. And, people claim that could be like a portal that they've walked through, a glitch in the matrix, some kind of wrinkle in time where they've been transported to some alternate timeline or even alternate dimension. Those are the truly fascinating ones to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you. Most definitely.
Did you have something, Krista?
No, you're good.
I found fascinating. I did some research on the Madman Markham. In fact, I heard it on it was Art Bell's show. How this guy actually, and this guy was on twice. He was on 20 years apart. If he came on, like let's say 1970, then he was back on in 1990, where this guy supposedly made a time machine, right? He first experimented with it. He threw like a rock through it. Then all of a sudden, the rock did disappear, and then 100 yards from his property, he found the rock. And then he started continuing on. He eventually went to jail because he started stealing transformers to power up this thing. And one day he walks through this transformer. He supposedly disappears. He disappears in 1970. He all of a sudden finds himself, in this, I think the state that he was in was Pennsylvania. Then he just appears, as he explains, in Ohio in the year of 1980. And he was listed as missing in 1970, but he recirculates in 1980 in Ohio.
Wow.
Fascinating tale. I've never heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to want to, because if you can find Art Bell, Madman Markham, awesome story.
I'm going to look into that myself.
Some of those old Art Bell archives are online where you can get to them, and that's all his shows are worth a listen. He's one of my heroes.
Yeah.
He and Long John Nebel, who predated Art Bell, he was on the radio in New York, and I think sometime in the 50s, and he was the first like overnight guy that would take calls and talk strange stuff. But Art was a legend. I never got to meet the man, even though I lived right in Las Vegas, and he lived what they say in Vegas, over the hump. You go over to Pahrump. Now, I was on Art's show once, but he was sick at the time, and his producer, Heather Wade, had taken over that night. And that was the first time I ever told my black-eyed kids story, because she knew about it. She and I were friends outside of this. And during one of the many breaks, Art actually called in to tell her what a good job she was doing. He's like, "Hey, Steve, I love that black-eyed kid story." And I was like, wow, that's as close as I got, Talked to Art Bell when I was on Art Bell's show, even though he wasn't on it. So,
yeah.
Wow.
But he was a legend. Those are big shoes to fill.
Yeah, I got to ask you about the black-eyed kid, Steve, because that kind of like terrifies me. I don't know what I would do if, a couple small children came up on my porch with seemingly the blackened eyes, and they don't quite look human, but yet you don't know what they are. And supposedly, if you let them into your home, like a lot of times they'll come up and ask to use the telephone. They're lost. They want to call their mom and dad. But in fact, it says if you let them in, then you will be jinxed with bad luck. And I know Krista might be into that, but I
Mhm.
was wondering both your opinions on that. What's your thoughts on the black eyed kids?
Mine personally, I mean, don't let them in. If you let them in, you just invited them in. So we don't really know what exactly they are, and if there's something on the demonic side, well, you just opened yourself up, invited it in for
Yeah, it's. I was on Amber's Paraworld, and we had that discussion on there that you can inadvertently invite things into your home. She says, if you have a welcome mat, throw it away. She said, there are
Mhm.
things that wander around that can see that as an invitation. I actually want one that says go away. But somebody else said, well, just turn it upside down. And she said, no, because then if there's any entities underneath, they'll see that and come up.
Yep.
And that's I grew up in the South, as you can probably tell by my accent, but there was a lot of belief like that down there. People would paint the underside of their porch. There's a color, you can look it up. It's called haint blue. Haint is haunt in the southern vernacular, and they would paint the top of their porch haint blue, so that if anything came up on the porch with the intent of coming in, it would see that and then go up through the porch roof. I
Yep.
think it was going up. My granny was very superstitious. Old farmhouse she lived in had the kind of keyholes that you could peek through that took a skeleton key. She would put garlic in the keyholes at night, a little clove of garlic in there to keep witches from coming through the keyhole. I mean, she believed it at 100%.
Hmm.
So there's
Yeah.
some strange beliefs out there, but she never did have any witches in her house. So I guess it worked.
What do you believe the black-eyed kids are, Steve?
I think there's a demonic energy to it.
Mhm.
In my experience, I'd never heard of them before. They were trying to get in my car, and came up, and they didn't talk to me, but there was two of them, one older and one younger. The older of the two was maybe 12, the younger one maybe 9 or 10, and the taller one was talking to the smaller one. Oh, he won't leave us out here. He'll let us in his car. He'll give us a ride. It's cold. We're hungry. But it wasn't cold. It was in the summertime. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning in an industrial area. I'd been in moonlighting, putting in a computer network, and yeah, I've never. I mean, I've had some really hairy experiences. I mean, things that I couldn't see chased me through the woods and stuff like that when I was younger. But this was absolutely the most frightened I'd ever been of these two little girls, the two weird little
Wow.
girls that didn't have any eyeballs or had looked like lumps of coal for eyes. I'd never heard of it then, but it was
What were
just
they wearing? Do you remember their
it
clothing?
was just like very plain. It was jeans and a hoodie. They looked almost identical. The jeans were darker than the hoodie, but just very simple clothing. And
Wow.
I to this day, I think it was something demonic, just
Mhm.
because of what I felt rolling off them. It wasn't two little girls, and again, I don't even know if I actually saw two little girls, if it was something, and that's how it was presenting itself. If you hear
Right.
about Whitley Strieber and his owls, I believe maybe that was my owls. There's some sort of cosmic trickster out there, I think. And there's a really good book. It's long out of print now. It's called The Rebirth of Pan by a gentleman called Jim Brandon. They also wrote a book called Weird America back in the 70s. But in The Rebirth of Pan, he talks about this trickster and how there are things that seem to be just sent to us to either try to mess with us or see how far we can go. I mean, you had the Men in Black. Okay, well, they're driving nice, shiny cars and wearing suits, but the suits are out of style. The cars are old, but they look brand new. They speak strangely. They intimidate witnesses and things. Okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try a black-eyed kid, or kids. Everybody loves kids,
Yep.
but then it's these creepy kids with black eyes that want to come in your house, or the phantom clowns, and that dates back. I think Lauren Coleman wrote about that, like back in '83, I believe, in his book Mysterious America. And here's these clowns, and everybody loves clowns, haha, but these are creepy clowns that come out of the woods and chase you and things. So it's like whatever it is can't quite get it just right. It's like, well, that didn't work, back to the drawing board.
Right.
And I've even said that if they come up with black-eyed bikini models carrying pizza and metal albums and I go missing, you'll know what happened. They came to my door and I let them in.
Yeah. Well, real quick on your black-eyed kids experience. Do you remember like the sounds around you, or like the way were you feeling odd before you seen them, or was there anything that sent off a light bulb?
Not really until because when I first saw them, they were on the other side of the parking lot, empty parking lot, except for my car sitting on a curb. And it struck me as odd because it's 2 a.m. I'm coming out of this medical building where I've been putting this computer network in. And here's two kids sitting over here. So I'm just, not my business. I'm just trying to get my stuff in my car, my spool of Cat 5 cable and my punch down tool and all this stuff. And then every time I would look over, they had stood up. They were a little bit closer. And I never actually saw them walk. But every time I looked, they were closer. And then when they came under like one of those orange sodium vapor street lights or whatever they had back then, I could see that there was no eyes, or at least a blackness where their eyes should have been. But the fear that I felt off of them, it wasn't fight or flight. It was just pure flight. Mm-hmm. And I finally got everything in, got in my car. And by that time, they were right up to the door. I was driving a Mazda Miata convertible at the time. And that was one reason it took me so long to get out there. The Miata's trunk wasn't much bigger than some cars' glove box. I was trying to play Tetris and fit everything in there. When I did get in the car, I fumbled with the keys. When I got it started, they were just there. I mean, they could have hopped in the car. I put it in gear, jumped over the curb, drove down through the lawn of the place, and got on the road. And the whole time, I had a girlfriend at the time that just lived a couple miles away. And when I was moonlighting like that, I would generally go to her house and spend the night so I could be at my regular job on time the next morning. Well, that night, I turned the other way and drove to my parents' house, which is like 25 miles away. And the whole time there, I'm speeding. I mean, a cop would have been a welcome sight at that point. But I kept looking over to like reassure myself that they didn't get in the car, or that they weren't hanging on to the spoiler, or that they weren't running along beside me. Just crazy, irrational fear like that. And I've never felt it. Even talking about it now, I get a little quaver in my voice. My palms get sweaty. Yeah. It's almost like a PTSD. That.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I understand that, and as you said, I've studied demonology and into, what do people trust is children and the elderly. So a demonic entity will appear as a child. They will appear as an older person,
I believe that. My brother was a Pentecostal minister, and he's told me some stories that would absolutely curl your hair as far as dealing with demonic forces and things. And again, I don't, you can believe whatever you want to believe. I'm not a religious person, but I'm spiritual. What I know is in here. But to me, it felt demonic. The energy I felt off them, it definitely wasn't human. It wasn't really two little girls. It was either something appearing that way, or if it was, there was some sort of demonic force controlling those little girls. Mm-hmm. And then here lately, I've been hearing stories of black-eyed adults. And I thought about that. If those are little girls, this was sometime in the 90s. And if they progressed, they would be probably in their 30s or older now. So did the black-eyed kids grow up, and is that where the black-eyed adults come from? Or they're a different entity altogether? Do black-eyed kids grow up? Who knows? That's kind of stuff that rolls around in my head when I don't sleep.
Yeah. Wow. Brandy had a prior question to you, Steve. Have you ever had any positive experiences with the black-eyed kids? I take the answer to that as no. But she does follow up with this that I just put up for you. There's someone who allegedly has seen them and shadow people their whole life, and she embraces their presence. Now, Brandy does say, I'm not sure that's a good idea. I think I would tend to agree with you, Brandy.
Yeah, again, it's what you believe and how you believe it, and there are ways that the forces of evil, if you believe in that things, it can kind of lure you in, and you think you're controlling it, and then it ends up controlling you. I'm sure Kristen knows what I'm talking about here. That something as innocent as a spirit board or Ouija board, I've known people that got into that to a point where they were obsessed with it and possibly oppressed or possessed by whatever was in that board. It's, I've never had a problem with them myself. Now, my grandmother on my mother's side they came out of the spiritualism movement from around the turn of the last century. And when my mom was a little girl, they used spirit boards. They did table tapping and table tipping. They had seances and stuff. And that was just how my mom grew up. She didn't know any better. But later on, they got out of all that. My mom had 9 brothers. She was the only girl. And the 7th child, he would have been a 7th son if it hadn't been for my mom, ended up being a Baptist preacher, and he got them to get rid of all their spiritualism stuff. So who knows? But no, that's my only experience with the black-eyed kids, and hopefully the only one I'll ever have. I've had people ask me that, would you want to encounter them again? And I typically would say a hard no, but then there's the other side of me that would think, well, would I be more prepared this time? What would I do this time? I'd try to get a picture of them, or I'd pull out, I'd do something. I'd maybe try to get them to talk to me instead of just to each other. But
don't do that though, because then you're opening yourself up.
Right. Again, it's like that whole, the vampire thing where you have to give them permission. It's the same with anything demonic. If you believe like I do, anything only has the power over you that you give it.
That's right.
And if you start talking to it and interacting with it, you're essentially giving into it. You're communicating with it and speaking. And my brother, when he's talked about some of these, what they call deliverance services, where he cast demons out of people. Who am I to say he did or didn't? But I know what I've heard. That was one of the first things he would do when those voices started coming out of someone and threatening him, he would tell it to shut up. And it would shut up because he said that one of the first cases he ever worked like that they spent like an hour arguing with this spirit or whatever it was in this person. And then he learned what to do. You tell it to shut up, you seal it, and then it's not going to argue with it. You just send it out and it goes on. Yeah. But I never would stick around when they were having those services. Sometimes it would just happen. I mean, you would have people in the church that would suddenly go into convulsions and start growling or talking in some weird voice. I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm at the back door.
Right.
I love this topic, and
we've strayed from missing persons here.
We can blend it together here, because I just was going to say, well, first of all, I used to collect when I was married. We used to go to shops, antique shops, the wife and I. And we brought, and I like collecting all that stuff. I mean, she did, but she turned me on to it. Man, I love going to these little shops, and we had a special room dedicated to all of it. And Steve and Krista, as soon as months after we set this up and we bought all this stuff, weird things started happening in my house. I would see shadow people. I would see like images, and I had to shake my head. And I would always ask, the wife at the time, are you seeing what I'm seeing? No. Several months later, she started seeing weird things. So kind of blending this with the missing 411, I don't know that I've come across any of the shows where people that have brought things home or kind of conjured up a spirit led to a disappearance. Have you ever heard of anything like that or reported?
No, but that's given me some ideas. Thanks, Rob. I'd like to look into that. Maybe talk to some of these families. Was there anything strange going on in the home prior to this disappearance? Was there something brought in that made everybody uncomfortable, like an inanimate object? Growing up, my parents were antique dealers. They had an antique shop, and they would bring stuff in sometimes. I couldn't wait for it to be out of the house and in the shop. I mean, even if it was out in the garage, it had just an energy to it that I didn't like. And that would be an interesting path to pursue and see if anybody, and I believe stuff like that can happen. I've got a friend in Florida right now. She's probably watching. She may be in the chat, that's sending me a haunted object that belonged to a friend of hers. It was her grandmother's favorite item. And when her grandmother passed away, they started seeing her grandmother around this item. And she's like, I don't want this anymore. Even if it's my grandmother, I don't want her to haunt me. So she sent the item to my friend, and then my friend started having all this weird stuff happen in her house.
Mm-hmm.
So she's packed it up. She's going to send it to me, and I'm going to see what happens here. This house, there's already some stuff I've had to deal with here, but I've got that under control. But I think I'm going to do a live stream, put it in a room by itself, set up a microphone in there, and just people can sit around and watch this and see what happens. But I'll reveal more. I'll give the full story behind it when I'm ready to present it. But I'm actually excited to have a supposedly known haunted object that I'm gonna. And again, I may have to give it away or something. I'll have a raffle or a sweepstake. Win Steve Stockton's haunted item.
I mean, I tell you, I've had a lot of haunted items, and I've talked to, I think, Chris, I might have talked to, I talked so much about this. I know I talked to you, Steve. Prior to having a Bigfoot encounter and doing what I do today, I had no problems with ghosts or haunted objects until I learned more about, if you don't know what you're doing, you can conjure some things up that you don't want.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, Steve, just you opening your home to it and allowing that in your home, that's another way of inviting it in.
Yeah, and I've got to be careful with that. But I smudge and I do things like that. I've got things that I do to protect myself, and I'll have to be on high alert for this one. But yeah, what you're talking about there, where things can get out of control. I have heard a story one time about a couple little girls that were going to use a Ouija board to conjure a demon to send to this other little girl. They ended up conjuring 13, and everybody involved with this had something happen to them, some worse than others. One girl's parents were killed in an automobile accident. Another girl broke a leg, but something happened to everyone that was involved in that little circle there that was trying to send something toward this one girl. And that's kind of the way this stuff works. You can control stuff. You can do stuff, but there's a price that you pay for it. And I like to think of that as a kind of a law of sowing and reaping. Because when you plant a kernel of corn, you don't get a kernel back, you get a stalk. And on that stalk, there's several ears. And on each one of those ears, there may be 100 kernels of corn. So be careful, be mindful of what harvest you sow, because you're going to reap it, whether it's good or bad.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm huge on that. I believe what you put out in the universe comes back.
It comes back to you.
And that's real quick, guys. That's a great point that we can stop and start over. So we have to take a 2 or 3 minute break because of our listening audience on iHeartRadio listening in, and Odyssey Radio. We are taking for our sponsors a 2 minute break, but come back and subscribe to Texas Front Porch and Bigfoot Mystery Rob to pick up where we left off for the next 30, 40 minutes or so. And Krista, we got a new break banner where I'm going to put up and see if Tex did it correctly, because last time it didn't quite work. So everybody, we're taking a 2 minute break. We'll be back. Go get your drink, your beverage, your chips, whatever. We'll be back in a minute, and let's see if Tex corrected this.
Four minutes to go, folks. 4 minutes. 3 minutes. We're almost there. Two-minute warning, guys. 2-minute warning. One minute. 1 minute.
And we are back. Steve Stockton, Missing Persons Mysteries. Krista
Yes.
from Blondes and Booze. You can see their show. It debuted last Friday on our channel. Subscribe to Blondes and Booze. Now, what's the exact name of your YouTube channel, Krista? Because I know the words run together for me.
Yeah, the exact name of the YouTube is Blondes and Booze Paranormal Podcast. Is
Awesome.
YouTube.
And we have Blondes and the Booze, like I should say boo, because it always sounds like I'm promoting alcohol.
I heard you last night on Jason's.
Did you? Oh, you did? Okay.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. You know, that was a great show last night. We talked a little bit about the they, right? The Illuminati.
Yeah.
And, you know, getting back to some of that, Steve. And again, I love the topic we were just talking about. I'd like to get back with that. But speaking of last night's show that we did, it was a great show talking about population control.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, Steve, any of these elites, globalists, or perhaps even our government are purposely involved in some of these missing 111 cases?
Well, there's those theories that they do that the government is involved with either directly or indirectly taking people for whatever nefarious purpose. There's even theories that that's how the national parks came about, was to contain whatever's in those areas in there, because the government know about them and know that they're taking people. There's a guy on YouTube here that has a channel called South Force 10, and he talks about these creatures in the Smokies. They're sort of a hybrid, kind of like between a Bigfoot and a person, but they're cannibals, these hairy wild men that live in the national park. And he claims that back in the 30s, even before the national park, the Great Smokies anyway, was created, that his relatives were hired to go and hunt these beings and thin them out a little bit. So who knows? And you hear stories about the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases. Right down the road from me here in Dulce, New Mexico, there's supposedly an underground base there where they've got not only alien bodies, but alien human hybrids that they create there. So, again, who knows?
There was a story too, Steve, you probably heard about. I forgot the guy's name. He has been, he's turned up missing, Steve. And I'm sorry, Steve, I forgot the guy's name. Perhaps you've heard the story about the person that was sent down in that underground base in Dulce and reported back and made it public on actual aliens down there. And actually, he went down with a team of black ops, and they actually got in a firefight with these aliens. And he lost half of his ear, scarred up his face, made it out alive. He was the only survivor, and he went public with this a year or two after this encounter, and he all of a sudden vanished.
Yeah, that's sometimes some of those vanishings are convenient for somebody else for whatever reason. Somebody knew too much, or they were afraid they were going to talk. There's been all kinds of speculation about some of them. There was I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he had worked as a contractor for the government doing defense work and stuff, went missing. And again, did he know too much and somebody took him out, or did he know too much and he ran away to keep from being taken out and changed his identity and started over? I mean, there's just so many. It's hard to factor in an unknown with these, but I've heard some good arguments for both, that the government is involved or they are complicit as far as whatever's doing it, they allow it to happen. Or, you've heard the old story about that they traded experimentation on humans and cattle and things like that in exchange for higher technology.
Yeah, I believe that. And I believe that we are being watched, even like shows like this and my show, that if you get on a touchy subject, I see too many times where people's internet's messing up, or,
Sorry.
they were fine before then, or people's phones get tapped or wired, Yeah.
Absolutely, Chris. And we'll wait for Steve in a minute here. And I was going to add that, believe it or not, what you say is correct. If you have any type of show, paranormal, cryptids, ufology, you are on a list, from what I heard from certain people with the CIA, the FBI. And in fact, not to scare off our listeners, but even if you partake, you don't even have to have a show. If you partake and listen, just listen in to some of these podcasts, participate in chat, that there's information on you folks as well.
I believe that. I wholeheartedly believe that. I just watched too many shows like you last week, with Daryl on your show. His internet was messing up, and last night DA's show, and it was, subjects, about, Bigfoot and that type of thing. I fully believe it. I know someone whose phone, I believe, is being tapped and watched.
Well, an interesting story. About 2 weeks ago, Jason and I had a show. We're talking about Dogman, but we had a person on who actually former military, and he did not specify on the show because he couldn't. He knew that he couldn't speak on it publicly. But after our show, we were all backstage. And I'm like, hey, come on, man, you got to give me some intel. And we were talking about super soldiers. And he started talking. He goes, I can tell you guys one thing that I'm not supposed to talk about. Not more than having 3 words uttered out of his mouth, our entire internet system, all 3 of us, it was me, Jason, and this other guy, it went dead. Myself and Jason went to call him back, so we had his phone number. And when you called his cell phone number back, it went directly to business signal.
Yep.
And the next day, he texted us back and said that entire night he did not have his internet, nor could he use his phone. And I know, Steve, you don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe in it either. And I guarantee you there was somebody listening in on that show and what we're talking about after.
And this was just coincidence, but what my dog was barking about, there was a knock at the door, and there was the police outside, and I thought, there you go, they've come to get Steve Stockton. They were here about something else, asking some questions about the neighbors. But I heard the knock, and somebody opened the door, and I saw a uniform and a badge, and I thought, they were listening. They come to take me away.
You know, Steve, that would make for a great missing persons mystery. Podcasters that come up missing after doing shows they shouldn't be talking about.
Well, you've got people that have, like Kenny Veach and the M Cave, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
He found this cave out in the desert, and there was some strange stuff, strange circumstances there. He talked about getting almost like radiation burns or something from being in this cave. He thought he was onto something, and then just disappeared. And who knows what happened to him.
Yeah.
Did he get too close?
Yeah. It's really scary stuff because you can't escape it. You know, I mean, they control everything from, your phones to your bank accounts to everything.
And if it's some shadow government or somebody like that after you, they answer to no one. They've got everything available to them that they could need to catch you, track you, gaslight you, whatever they want to do, discredit you, drive you crazy. So they don't have to actually do anything to you. Maybe you'll do it to yourself, so there's you have to be careful, especially with some of the stuff that there seems to be something out there that doesn't want certain things talked about or certain things known. And like you said, people that they get too close tend to go missing. And it's not just supernatural stuff either. It's politics and government things.
Absolutely.
Look into Danny Casolaro, who was the CIA, the former CIA guy that they found floating in the creek behind his house, and supposedly a canoe accident. Who knows? I mean, there's you make the wrong people mad, they can make your life miserable or worse.
That's right. I watched a documentary that, kind of on like with the missing people type thing, that President Eisenhower supposedly signed a treaty with like the Greys, like they could, take certain a certain amount of people in exchange for technology, and his great granddaughter or something even came on and said, this was true. So.
Yeah, I can't think of her name, but she's got a YouTube channel or a podcast or something. But she believes that something like that went down, and it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my country, but I don't trust my government. We've been lied to too many times by both sides. I don't pick sides. There is no winning side in that argument to me. I'm for myself.
Yeah.
But
I firmly believe in that, Chris. I do believe that something went down. With aliens, I do. I mean, and I wouldn't have, if you'd asked me this question a decade ago, I'd laughed it off. But, when you go through certain experiences, you talk to certain people, and everybody keeps saying the same things. People are not making these things up.
Right.
I mean, sure, we talk about folklore and myths. Well, you know what? There's a basis of some sort of certainty behind these things too. Some have maybe been embellished more than others, but there's a reason why all these things started.
Yep, absolutely.
And for me, the one key thing there is look at the technology. Look from the time of the Roswell crash or the Kenneth Arnold sighting in the 40s, and then look less than 20 years to the 60s, how far we've come, then to the 80s to now, how far the technology has progressed.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I always tell the story with the smartphones. Not too long ago, I was in Kroger's. Kroger. I went to a different one, so the layout. This Kroger was a little bit different than my local one that I go to. I was somewhere else, and I had to stop up there for something. And here's the thing, you guys. What I talk, and I got to make this perfectly clear. I wasn't talking. I went up for a specific hot sauce. And I'm thinking in my mind, what the hell aisle is this down? Because it was not laid out like my
Mhm.
local store. I thought it. I thought the word, it was Cholula. It was Cholula hot sauce. And you know what? My phone, buzzes and I open it. It's, Kroger, and it's aisle 13. I'm not making that up. Went down aisle 13. There was a Cholula hot sauce.
Wow, that's crazy.
Now, I haven't had the thought happen, but otherwise, ambient conversations.
Mhm.
Lady I used to rent from in Oregon when I lived up there, she was diabetic, and one day she was telling me something about her diabetic supplies. So on my phone and on YouTube, I start getting all these ads for diabetic supplies. So they're listening, they're keeping track,
Absolutely.
and these RFID tags, those are in books now. You look in the spine of a book, a hardback book, you'll find an RFID tag in there. And that's supposedly, to prevent theft and things. But I've also heard that they have the ability to literally drive through your neighborhood and scan and see what kind of books you're reading. Well,
Wow.
that's we're getting close to 1984. There, it just came a few decades too late.
Hmm. That's scary stuff.
That is. I mean, if anybody out there believes that you're private, you have privacy, you have no
No.
privacy.
As long as you carry your cell phone on you, you have no privacy.
They can track
Well,
you even when it's off, even when it's turned off.
Yep.
They
when
can
it's not,
track
and most of us now probably, if not now, I'm sure everybody listening in the future, all our televisions are smart TVs now,
Yep.
right?
you.
Yeah.
It's not coincidence that every time you turn on your phone or your TV, there's an ad for something that you're into. I mean, you could come up with, hey, I need to, you know, y- like you said, just thoughts, ambient thoughts, or speaking out
Yeah.
loud. That's how it goes right to your phone. That's why you got all these ads. It's about things that you're interested in, and it
Yeah.
forces and it makes you go out and buy it, whether
Yep.
you want to or not. In some cases,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly.
but
I have a,
yeah, go ahead,
oh,
Chris.
go ahead. I just have a quick question
Yeah,
for
go.
Steve to get back onto
Sure.
the missing persons. What is do you have any stories you can tell us with happy endings?
Oh, there's a few. I mean, people that have been found that were recovered. There was one lady that we covered not too long ago. She'd gone hiking and had fallen off a cliff or something like that. Like broke her legs, broke her hips, broke just about every bone in her lower body. Laid there for days, and was had a little bit of food and water and stuff with her, and she was able to survive. She eventually crawled and to a place where she was found. They'd been out looking for her, but where she was, they couldn't find her. But she survived. They put her back together with rods and screws and things. And she wrote a very inspirational book called What I Learned by Falling. I mean, that's a funny title. The first time I heard that, I almost laughed. I thought, this isn't a laughing matter. But there are some cases like that. And then even some of the ones that do have a happy ending have a strange twist, like where children where they went missing and they're found, and they say a bear took care of them and
Right.
cuddled with them and fed them
Yeah,
berries. We all know bears don't do that,
no,
Hmm.
they'll eat
uh,
you.
and I don't think it was a bear.
I don't either.
I don't
And but
either.
then they're like, okay, it was a bear. Show's over. Nothing here to see. Go on about your
Yeah.
business.
And make that
But
child believe in its head it was a bear.
it was a bear. Yeah.
Yep.
You know, it's again back to the missing. I've read accounts, Steve. I don't know if it was on your show. I just in my head. What's your thoughts on this? Whether I've heard this with both children and adults. Well, they will go missing in the national parks or forests or state lands, and the clothes that they were wearing will be found. But not only it's not like they're found tattered or torn, but they're folded neatly and stacked like on a rock or a log.
Yeah, that's happened. Boots. A lot of times they'll find their boots sitting side by side, just like now there is. They talk about paradoxical undressing, where when you're cold and you're about to freeze to death, your body is trying to keep the heat up in the core, and it starts throwing off heat, and you can feel burning up even though you're about to freeze to death. But I don't buy it because they've been clothes, like I said, neatly folded and hanging in a tree, or there's been people found still wearing their clothes, but with them turned inside out, and just strange things like that. I don't believe it's all paradoxical undressing. I believe there's sometimes that just, and I've thought about that. There was a short story that I remember reading in high school called The Most Dangerous Game. And it was about a trophy hunter that had gone after all these big beasts and things, but then he decided he wanted to hunt man, that a man would be the hardest beast to catch and take down. Well, if you think about that, if something's hunting humans, and I'll tell another story to preface this out here with, what would be the easiest way to give it somewhat of a sporting chance, so you're not just shooting fish in a barrel, but give them a head start, take their boots away and let them run for it. They're not going to get far in the woods. Well, when I lived in Portland, Oregon, they have what's called the Shanghai tunnels out there. Sorry, the cats are climbing in out the window here, opening the curtains. But they would actually Shanghai people. Literally, they would go into a bar or brothel. They would slip them a Mickey. If they did wake up before they were on a ship headed for who knows where, they would find themselves in the dark in these tunnels underneath downtown Portland. The tunnel floors are covered with sand. Their shoes are gone, and there's broken glass down there. So if you were either unfortunate enough or fortunate enough to wake up before they were on a merchant ship headed for somewhere, you weren't going anywhere. It was dark. You didn't have any shoes on. The floors covered with glass. So again, if you were going to chase something or hunt something in the woods, what better way to make a little bit of sport out of it? Take their shoes, give them a running start, and then go after them. I think there's something out there that hunts humans, either human predators, a serial killer, or some kind of, there's talk about the predator creature, the glimmer man, the transparent thing, whatever you want to call it. I think there's things out there besides animals. Now, animal predation is some of that. But again, if a bear gets a person or a big cat gets a person, they're not going to leave absolutely no trace of anything. There's going to be forensic evidence. There's going to be blood or bodily fluid. There's going to be signs of a struggle. A bear or a mountain lion won't eat your belt buckle or won't eat your blue jeans or something like that. There's going to be something left.
Right.
Because a lot of people try to explain it away that, oh, well, a big cat got them or a bear took them or something. I've seen, don't want to call it crime scene, because the way I look at that, if you're out in the elements and an animal gets you, that's kind of on you. That would be like if a cheeseburger walked through my living room and I ate it. You're in their habitat. You're on their playing ground. If you're out there messing around in the woods and not paying attention and something gets you, then it didn't know. Like same with surfing. If a shark looks up and mistakes you for a wounded seal and you get bit, it's not the shark's fault. It's following its instincts. It's your fault for swimming or surfing in shark-infested waters. Same with a big cat or big bear, and that does happen, but those people are found. Usually when a big animal, something higher up the food chain than we are, an apex predator, if you will, gets a human, there's traces of that. And I've seen, like I said, evidential photos of what a bear attack looks like or what a big cat looks like at times. And it's not pretty, but there's evidence. It's not like it just takes you away. Now people say, well, sometimes cats will bury their food, and so will the bear. They'll cache it, in a tree or under a bush or something. Well, yeah, but then why is it never found? Same with these people that supposedly, that's another excuse you hear a lot. Well, they wanted to end their life and they went off. But sometimes these people, literally, they parked at the trailhead, they walked on the trail, and they're never seen again. It would be very, very, very hard to get yourself into a place that quickly, or even at all necessarily, where nothing would be left of you. Like I said, there's animal predation, but they're not going to eat everything. There's going to be some trace of you left. So I don't buy those where maybe somebody that's going into the woods to end it all, something or someone senses that and like, let me help you, So who knows? It's
right.
It's scary to think about, because there are places in the national parks, and I know of places in the Great Smokies. I've been off trail and done some of the rough camping, wilderness hiking and stuff. There are places where I may not have been the only human ever there, but there hadn't been anybody else there in a long time.
Right.
Maybe the Native Americans or something like that. And people, oh, that's not possible. In case in an example there. Eric Rudolph, the abortion clinic bomber. This was a guy that had no backwoods, no outdoors experience. He was at the top of the FBI's most wanted list. He hid out in Nantahala National Forest in Georgia for like between 5 and 6 years. And the only way he got caught, he was going into some little town in North Carolina and digging the day-old bread and snack cakes out of the dumpster. A rookie cop saw him and recognized him from the wanted poster. But if somebody with no experience can hide that long and stay away from hikers and other people in the woods, then somebody determined to do that, somebody determined to go in the woods and hide and stay off grid, you could do it indefinitely. If you know what you're doing, there's food, there's water, there's stuff out there. You can build shelter if you've got the woodcraft and woodlore knowledge. So, and that also use that argument for when people say that, you couldn't have families of feral cannibal, Bigfoot / hillbillies living in the woods that nobody's seen. Well, you just haven't been far enough back in the woods yet. You don't know what's out there.
Yeah, I don't think, you kind of were hitting on some things I was going to ask. It's like, when people do go missing, a lot of times there'll be some trace evidence of wildlife, a bear attack, cougar attack. Now there's instances where if it is paranormal, maybe someone did fall through a portal, right? And my thing is, we also mentioned serial killers. Unless you have to be extremely intelligent to snatch up a person, they go missing, never to be found, and yet this person, let's say it is a serial killer, has never been discovered or brought to justice. That's got to be an intelligence that is beyond ours.
Yeah, but I think that's possible. At one time, the FBI thought there was one or more serial killers active on the Appalachian Trail. Now, that runs from Georgia all the way up to Maine and actually farther beyond that. But in the United States, that's as far as it goes. And again, you could follow that trail. It's over 2,000 miles long. There's a lot of little towns along the way. Damascus, Virginia, for example. The trail runs right through there. You could hop off in that little town, take somebody, do whatever you wanted to them, hop back on the trail. Even if they've got out a police dragnet, they're not going to have somebody on the trail checking IDs. That's going to be the highways. They're going to look out for other things. So, and again, even if they were watching the Appalachian Trail, if you're that wily and know the area that well, you can stay off the trail and still travel parallel to it. So.
You even brought up something that I never even thought about, and you funnily you said the hillbillies, and what about these mountain people? We don't see these people. They're not in public. They're like, they don't have any human. They don't want anything to do with society. People are tucked way back in the hills, West Virginia, whatever hills or mountain range you're talking about. I'm starting to think in my mind now that with missing people, do you think there is and you see some of these movies about these people, they inbreed and they turn into grotesque looking figures. You think that's a reality? Do you think that maybe that's yet another factor?
Again, it's possible.
I know it's possible. But yeah, I
know places like over where my dad's from, Middle Tennessee on the Cumberland Plateau. It backs up to the Big South Fork National Recreation Area. There was inbred people that lived there, probably still are. You have that in places, and who's to say they didn't go back out in the woods, and occasionally one or two of them decides to get out and hunt. And how do you know they haven't developed a taste for human flesh? You can speculate anything. That's the whole fun thing about theorizing. You can think of scenarios where that could exist. And again, that goes back to people saying, well, you can't get far enough back in the woods that you couldn't be found. Again, I just say you haven't been far enough back in the woods yet. If you were determined to live off grid, there are places you could go within the national park and nobody would ever find you.
Yeah,
and you could live off grid. And then again, these aren't people that have just decided to go and do it. You're talking second, third, fourth, fifth generations of people that have grown up in the woods in these mountains. They know the area. They know what they're doing. They know how to hunt, trap, and fish. They know how to get away, where to go, where to hide. You're not going to catch them if they don't want to be caught.
If living in 2023, I still can't fathom the thought of a human being that has never been with society, human society.
Mhm.
They don't even know what a TV looks like. And I guess Steve, Brant, or Krista, I guess there are a lot of people like that today that
Yeah.
you never hear about.
Yeah. And
Right.
especially in some of the South American countries. I mean, there are
For
native
sure.
tribes and things
Uh-huh.
down there that plane flies over, they throw spears at it. That's some big flying monster. But it's not as prevalent in Appalachian places like that as it was. But today, I could take you to places in West Virginia, parts of Kentucky, even Tennessee, people that have no running water, no electricity. I guess they choose to live that way, or they just don't care. Excuse me. And then you've got some of your religious sects like the Amish and some of those that eschew a lot of modern conveniences and stuff. And again, that's their deal. I don't shade anybody on the choices you make.
Mhm.
But I remember when Y2K was a threat, they were saying that some of the nomadic tribes in Africa and people like the Amish were people that it wouldn't affect. So they just go on about their business.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. Steve, we got about 5 minutes left. If you would, could you give us one of your favorite stories that you've come across for our listening audience here today? You are a great storyteller,
Well, thank you.
and I think we should end it with a story from Steve Stockton.
You want a missing person story? You want
Whatever you
something
want, Steve.
supernatural?
The
or-
floor is yours, Steve. We like it. Hey, listen, on this channel, everybody in this channel listening now and in chat, they love it all. Missing people, cryptids, paranormal, UFOs, you name
Yep.
it. As long as it's a good story, they love it.
Okay, well, I'll tell you about a missing time example that I had. The only
Awesome.
encounter I've ever had like that. And so technically, I might have been missing. I don't really know, but it was back in the late '70s. My parents and I had moved into a subdivision. We moved off our 26 acres out in the woods, which I miss to this day, and to a place closer to where I was going to high school. Well, the subdivision that we moved into was being built in 3 phases. Phase 1 had long been completed. Phase 2 was where we lived, had a new house built to my mom's how she wanted it built. It was a custom home. Well, phase 3 was up farther up the road and kind of in the back of where we lived, a mile or so. And all they had at the time was a paved road that went into phase 3. That was all still heavily wooded lots up there. This had been a huge family farm at one time, like, decades earlier. Well, a friend that lived up the street, we went to high school together. He was a year behind me. We were out riding our bikes one evening. School was in session, so it was in the fall. It wasn't summertime and it wasn't winter yet, but we'd rode our bikes back up to this part of the subdivision that was undeveloped and had a nice paved road, no cars, no traffic, no people up there. And we were just kind of riding along, and it was starting to get dark. It was maybe 8 o'clock, 7, 8 o'clock. And I heard this weird noise up in the woods, and he heard it too because we both looked up in the woods. It was kind of a metallic, kind of an echoing, some kind of weird sounding noise. I looked up there, the woods are dark, I didn't see anything. And then as soon as I turned my head back and looked, still on my bike, I'm still moving, but I'm going the other direction, back down the hill towards home. And we didn't say a word to each other. I just continued on. We went down the hill. He went to his driveway. I went on to my house. And I get there, and my parents are like, "Where you been? We were worried about you." And I said, "I was out riding bikes with Danny." And they're like, "It's almost 11 o'clock, and tomorrow's a school day. What are you doing?" And seriously, when we were up there, it was around, couldn't have been any later than 8 o'clock. But we talked about it later on. He heard the same thing I did. He experienced the same thing I did. But neither one of us knows what happened between around 8 and about 11. So there's 2 or 3 missing hours in there that I have no knowledge of. I have no idea. And he says the same story to this day. He would corroborate and back that up. I don't. There's part of me that wants to know and part of me that doesn't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
If I was probed in the woods by aliens or something, I don't think I want to know that.
Right.
So that's the only thing that I know of where I've ever had any missing time. But that's another big mystery in my life, kind of like some of these other experiences. What happened? Where were we? Was I missing? Did something take me up and then just put me back? Did it take the bikes too? How did we turn around and still moving? Wasn't pedaling, but just coasting. But I
Right.
was just on the bike going a different direction, and a couple of hours had passed. How do you explain that? You
Yeah.
don't. And just
Mm-hmm.
that's why I think we were just so shocked that we didn't even mention it. Like, whoa, what just happened? It wasn't anything like that. It was just like, okay, I don't know what happened. I just want to go home. One of those things, So
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Quick
absolutely.
question, real quick.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Do you feel like, Steve, because you've had like that experience, you've had the Black Eyed Kids experience, you've had Bigfoot experience, paranormal. Do you think like there's something that is all related?
yeah.
Because
Well, it's drawn to me for whatever reason. I've
Right.
had other people empaths and whatnot tell me that when anything weird or supernatural sees you, it's like literally like a candle, and they're drawn to
Mhm.
you. And my grandmother, the one I talked about that had been into spiritualism and stuff, she was a self-declared gypsy witch. Now I don't know where she got the gypsy part. She grew up in Cades Cove area in the Great Smokies, but she told fortunes, read tea leaves, coffee grounds, would feel the bumps on your head. Lost arts called phrenology. The old saying, you need to go get your head felt. That's what it was. They could feel the bumps on your skull and tell you things about you. She marked me as being a special child. Like I said, my mom had 9 brothers. She was the only girl out of all the grandkids. I was the only one born now, according to my grandmother, with a veil over my face. And all that is the afterbirth. Part of the amniotic sac was still over my face when I was born. Well, in her superstitious eyes, that marked me as a special child with the ability to see, hear, feel, smell, whatever, experience things
Right.
that other kids didn't. So if you want to blame it on something, blame it on that. But I came to the conclusion a few years ago, I thought, every house I've ever lived in was haunted to some degree. And then a few years ago, I thought, it wasn't the houses so much, it was me.
Yeah.
Because I could go into a house where nobody had ever had any real experiences, maybe few strange things. I move in, live there. All kinds of stuff happens. I had that happen in a house I lived in Las Vegas. And I think either my roommate didn't feel any of it or she was in denial. But later on, she became a believer because of some stuff that did happen there. That's for another show. I'll come back on either one of your guys' show and talk about that.
Absolutely.
Also, and you know what? I got to follow up there with something because Chris, you make a point, and Steve, and I just got before we go, I got to say something. I always seen ghosts. I thought, well, now I know that I did. I didn't quite know that as a kid. I mean, as a kid, prior to my Bigfoot encounter, I know that I've seen ghosts. And I know that Bigfoot, I seen a shadow of a Bigfoot as a kid with my brother up north. Now, and then again, when I was married, we bought those antiques. And then again, I seen other weird things in the house. And my stories are go on for hours and hours. And we're not going to do that here today. But when I seen the Bigfoot, the encounter, what happened, the transformation that it turned into, and then I really started researching this stuff big time. And I spoke with everybody I could. And several people, it told me, Rob, once you have a Bigfoot encounter or a paranormal experience like that that's traumatic, and he uses the exact same words you use, Steve, you will be marked.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened to me in 2018. And I can tell everybody listening, Krista, Steve, I have seen way more things since 2018 than I did from birth.
Yeah.
And I always have these premonitions. I can always feel something.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a lady, and again, Kroger's. Of course, that's my favorite place to go. We're like 5 feet away from each other, and she looks at me. I can feel somebody looking at me. It's this older lady. She's staring at me. It's during last Christmas, and I look, smile, hi. She goes, hi, and she says, you're blessed. Now listen, I believe I'm like you, Steve. I'm spiritual. I believe in God, but I'm not religious, right? I have a higher power. I call him God, right? So I don't in my life I don't really wear jewelry, especially I don't have a crucifix in my house. It's not because I don't believe, not my thing. I go home from the store, the Kroger, and I'm taking off my jacket, my coat. I reach into my pocket, and Steve, I told you this story.
Mhm.
And guess what I find in my pocket?
Yeah, you showed me a picture of it.
Well, no, the physical object, I was across, Krista,
Wow.
in my pocket.
Wow.
Never in my life have I ever had one. Never.
Yeah.
No.
There it was.
I wear one, and again, that's just what I like to do.
Sure.
But I've got several different ones that I wear. I've been wearing this one for a long time. But there, I've had apports, things like that
Yeah.
appear. I was talking to a friend in South Africa. We were talking about cryptids. She was going to write up some South African cryptids for me, stuff most people have never heard of. And we were talking about tea. Even though she lives in South Africa, she's got a British heritage, and she was talking about having tea and stuff. And literally, right after we had this conversation, I saw something sticking out from under the edge of my keyboard. And I lifted my keyboard up. There was a bag of it. I've still got it. I don't remember the brand, but there was a brand of English breakfast tea under my keyboard. I've never bought English breakfast tea. And there it was. And I know it wasn't there previously. Yeah. I'm not in the habit of putting tea bags under my keyboard, but there it was. I have no idea where it came from. I hung on to it. I was tempted to drink it, but then I didn't know where I might end up if I did. So I might end up in South Africa or be like the old Land of the Lost TV show. I've had people ask me that. If you saw a portal in the woods, would you step through it? I'd be tempted, especially if I have my dog and now my cat with me. I'd like to see what's on the other side, but it might be in like that old, the original Land of the Lost TV show. I might be fighting dinosaurs and slee stacks, but I would like to know what's through that portal.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, I think we're all the same. I can't speak for Krista, but I think she's probably, I would like to do, you know what? If I came across a portal in the woods, I'm 50-50. I'm probably 60-40. I'm probably 60-40. I'm going through. What I'm not going to do is go up that missing ladder, that just appears in the woods. It goes, that I don't think I'm going to do.
It goes out of sight. Yeah, like
that's another time.
The Bible talks about Jacob's ladder, and it reached up into the heavens, and the angels were going up and down it. Yeah, I'd stay off that.
I think I'd stay off that. Yeah, it's weird. I'll do the portal, but not the ladder.
Not climbing any beanstalks either. There's a giant up there.
There's a giant. Yes, right. You heard that last night, Steve, or the other night with Duke. Steve Stockton, Missing Persons Mysteries. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And also 13 past midnight, subscribe. Steve Stockton, wonderful guest. Thanks for the stories, my friend.
Oh, my pleasure.
I appreciate you having on. Krista, Blondes and Booze on YouTube.
Yep.
Correct? And then she's on then she does our show. Then her show comes on Friday nights, 9 East.
Yep.
Blondes, Booze, and the Woo. Great show. Glad to have you on, Chris. I appreciate it. I appreciate you hanging in for Jessica here today.
Thanks for the invite. This was fun.
I see a lot of
both of you guys. This is awesome. I can sit and talk like this all day.
I could too. I really could too. And other needs have to be taken care of today, of course. And I do got to say, I've seen a lot of new people in chat. Probably maybe because Steve was on. So thank you for that. Subscribe to Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. Subscribe to Texas Front Porch. I already mentioned Steve's shows and Krista's. And Jason is the Serial Papers. Bob Van Buren is Van Buren Variety. And still the lovely, the talented, my buddy Jessica Jones, the Cryptid Huntress. And you can also catch her Saturday nights on Space Out Radio at 9 in the East. Love her. Love you.
People I want to say hi to real quick. Absolutely. All my people that are here from either 13 past midnight or Missing Persons, please subscribe. I want to say hi to Cats on Parade, Jamie, Gracie Joe, AJK, and Selene over at KPNL Radio in Portland. And you simulcast or broadcast over there on KPNL.
Yes, Selene, the lovely Aunt Selene does my show live right now.
She's a good friend of mine. We used to hang out together sometimes. When I lived in Portland, we went to Squatch Fest together.
I had the privilege.
Get her to tell you that story sometime.
I had the privilege. I see she's in chat. I met Aunt Selene in Jefferson. One of the most genuine, down-to-earth women, great soul, great person. And I love you. Thanks for spending time with me when we were over there in Texas. That was a great time. Thank you. Thank you to everybody in chat.
Saying hi to somebody special in Indiana that sent me this mug. Thank you.
Very nice.
Yep, very nice.
Everybody in chat, love y'all. Thanks for tuning in. For everybody listening later, the super thanks is open if you want to, contribute. I know holidays are coming, but more importantly than your money, like, share, subscribe. So subscribe to us all. We love you. I'm going to look for the exit button, and we're going to call it a day here if I can find it. We got another new banner. All right, Steve, thanks. Thanks, Krista.
Yeah,
thanks
for
everybody.
having me here. I'll see y'all further on down the trail. Krista, get in touch. I'd like to be on your show too.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you.
All right. Hey, everybody,
Bye,
next Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. Brunch with BMR. I'm taking the day off. I'm eating turkey, watching football. Peace.
There you go.